Good afternoon, folks. As promised from earlier this morning, we're having a second Celtic briefing of the day, a sort of special one to look forward to, the derby match on Sunday, the first one of the season against Rangers. What a monumental occasion it promises to be, and Alison and Sean Martin are with me. Guys, I think that it's quite easy to recognise that probably looking at this game through a more optimistic lens than perhaps Celtic fans would have been a month ago, Alison. It's funny how quickly things can change. And to be honest, the 4-1 defeat at the end of last season wasn't really that long ago.
Yeah, it's incredible how quickly momentum can shift. I think in Glasgow, I think it sometimes only needs a few good results to restore a sense of optimism. But I think there's been more to it than just a few wins. I think it's maybe the identity that Celtic fans can clearly see emerging within a team. I think it's a sense of optimism about a new chapter. But I do think it's changed significantly from that first week of the season when you were contemplating an early exit from the Champions League as well as an opening night defeat through at Tynecastle, and we're already 3 points off the pace of Rangers, and all of a sudden this month looked huge and fairly seismic in terms of shaping the course of the season. So I think if you'd gone back to the beginning of the month and said this is where you'll be the Friday before going to Ibrox, I think most people would have been delighted with it. I think Furihashi's arrival has been a breath of fresh air. I think the 7 goals he scored, I think what he's done is just given everyone around the club a massive lift, and I think all of a sudden Celtic look like a team with goals in them. I think many of the frailties remain, but what you would trust them to do just now is to score goals.
Sean, Rangers certainly domestically anyway, recently against Celtic and other teams, just given the way that it works in the Scottish Premiership, won't really have had to deal with a team that is likely to just attack as much as they possibly can against them this weekend.
I think so, but I think the personnel as well is something that I'm intrigued to see how the Rangers defence deals with, specifically Kyogo. His movement, his awareness, how sharp he seems to be for the full time that he's on the pitch. And we've seen before, Connor Goldson in particular might not be quite as dominant as what it was like to be made out sometimes. And I'm just intrigued to see how the likes of him copes with Kyogo's movement in and around him, especially as you're saying, when there's going to be so many bodies attacking at the same time from Celtic if they've got possession as they'll seek to, basically.
Yeah, there are plenty of options now really for Celtic, how they want to put together their attacking trio, how they want to coordinate their midfield trio. It's a bit of rotation could go on, and we've actually written a piece predicting or trying to guess how Ange Postecoglou might set up his Celtic team against Rangers. That'll be out tomorrow, so we'll try not to give too much away on that. But Ryan Christie moved central last night against AZ. He's played on the wing for the most part under Postecoglou. James Forrest has played goodness knows how many Old Firm games compared to Leila Bada, who has come in and hit the ground running. So, Alison, just give us a flavour of what you might be expecting to see from Ange Postecoglou's side in terms of lineup.
You mentioned there about Ryan Christie and playing that central role. I think it's definitely a possibility ahead of Sunday's game. I also think when you're discussing the events of last night, I don't think you can look beyond the difference that Odsonne Edouard made when he came in. I thought he changed the complexion of the game. I thought he gave Celtic an out. And I just wonder if there might be a swan song role for Odsonne Edouard. I think there's all sorts of chat today about Ruben Kazan coming in and putting an offer in for him. We all know the situation about whether or not he's going to go or whether he doesn't. But I just wonder if he's maybe changed the thoughts of the manager in that regard, just with the performance and just how it altered Celtic's shape in terms of a game where they were really under the caution. I think it might be an option for Sunday, and I think what you could do, I think you have to keep Abada in the team. I think if it hadn't been for Furuhashi and the way he's arrived, I think Leila Bada, people would be shouting about him too, just given the manner of the start he's had for a teenager coming into a new culture in a new city. I think he's made a fairly phenomenal contribution in the opening weeks of his Celtic career, but it's slipped under the radar ever so slightly just because Kyogo's been so sensational, really, and has really stole his limelight, I think. But I wonder if that's a front three that's up for discussion.
Sean, it can't really be understated the importance of this. Any match against Rangers obviously is vital, but Celtic are on a pretty barren run against them at the moment. No wins in 6, and trends tell us that the team that wins the first derby of the season tends to go on and win the title more often than not.
Well, there was a couple of the games last season, even though Rangers were running away with the league and stuff, there were a couple of games last season where I thought Celtic were the better team and could have won it on a different day. Things didn't go for them. There was obviously that game where Rangers never even had a shot on target, still won. And there's just things like that. I don't know. In terms of 6 games without a win, obviously that is poor, regardless of the context of the games. But I do think in the context of the games, there was a couple that they could have won, so it wasn't as bad as maybe what was made out. As for Sunday, I think Celtic are the team getting into it with confidence, whether or not it's Ibrox and whether or not the fact that there's no Celtic fans there. In terms of the two teams, even though Celtic lost their qualifier last night and Rangers drew theirs, I still think Celtic are getting into this game as the confident team, the team with the momentum.
Alison, you've done your research on that, haven't you? That the team that does come in with the form behind them tends to go and seize the initiative in the match. The phrase, the form book goes out the window on Derby Day is an empty one.
It's a bit of a misnomer, to be honest. I think if you look through the results, you will have an odd game that throws up a result that no one would predict beforehand. You have a 5-1 here or a 4-0 or a 4-1. I don't think anyone really predicts that before a game, and there are aberrations to it, but on the whole, I think it's the confident team, the team with momentum and belief that tends to come out on top. And I don't think you can underestimate the mental side of it. I don't think you can underestimate the psychology of the fixture at all. I don't think you can underplay it. I think you have to embrace it. I think the fact that Celtic haven't beaten Rangers and haven't beaten Rangers convincingly for a number of seasons, I think it's there, but I think it's not as significant now. Had the club been in the position that they were a month ago, and it was a stuttering start to this campaign, I think the fact that they have picked up from there, the fact that they've looked like a team again, I think there's been a cohesion to Celtic, there's been a fluency to their play, particularly middle to front. I think it augurs well for them, and I think what that does is sow a confidence within the team, not just for those who watch and who might feel more optimistic about their chances, but also in terms of the trust that they have in one another when they go onto the pitch. Now, for anybody that watched last night's game, it goes to 2-1 midway through the first half, and I would wonder how many feared the worst at that point. Now, what you would have to say is it wasn't pretty and it was nervy, but there was a resilience to Celtic that we've not always seen of late, which again is notable just as the manner of how they've come on from middle to front.
Well, let's not beat around the bush here. Rangers have had a fairly sticky run against Malmo and Dundee United, but they proved last season that they're a good team and dangerous with the attackers they've got with Morelos and Kent and Kemar Roofe. Now, our popular columnist Kev McKenna wrote a piece that I think it went out today actually, that he struggled to get excited by heavy wins over St Mirren and Dundee and strong performance over Hearts because it needs to be done against a tougher opposition. So the job was done against AZ last night. Do you think the defence they did defend well against AZ in the most part because the 2 goals they scored were gifted to them by Joe Hart's mistake and then Starfelt's OG? Do you think this defence that hasn't really been tested overly much domestically will be able to deal with probably a different proposition in this Rangers attack, Sean?
I think Rangers will get their chances. I think most teams will get chances against Celtic. I just think that's the nature of the way that the way they're playing at the moment. Again, it will come down to things like the form of Joe Hart when he's pulling off saves, or even just the form of the Rangers attackers. Because for all we're saying that Celtic did defend resolutely, and they did at times. AZ still had chances in both legs, and not ones that Joe Hart saved, ones that they actively put over the bar and put wide. If you know what I mean, that was more on their attackers than it was Celtic's defending. So in that respect, I do think that Rangers will get chances, but it will come down to fine margins like, well, if Celtic have already scored a couple at that point, potentially, how Joe Hart's performing, how the defenders are performing, and how Rangers attackers are finding it as well.
Sean, we've spoken about this a few times on the daily briefings about how Celtic are just flying out the traps and barely giving their opponents any room to breathe in the opening half an hour, 20 minutes, half an hour, even the whole first half as we saw against Hearts. Can you foresee something similar happening against Rangers and just trying to give them a problem they've not had to deal with before?
I think they'll certainly try. I think that's what they'll go out and try to do. Whether that is what happens or not, again, it will depend on the way that they deal with the atmosphere and the way that the Rangers players come out the traps as well. But I've said before on this that, I mean, I'm almost intrigued, as much as I don't want to say it, I'm almost intrigued to see what happens if they don't score early, if it goes longer and longer without the kind of the system quite working in terms of paying off with a goal, much less chances, just to see how they deal with it. As long as they keep playing the system that they're meant to be playing, then you would think it would pay off. Last night, I think it's a different type of payoff. They didn't win the game, but they also, despite what like the pundits in particular on the Premier Sports were saying, trying to encourage them to lump it at every opportunity, only half an hour in. I don't think they really know the team that they're talking about if they're saying lump it half an hour in. It wasn't going to happen like that. I don't think it made sense for it to happen like that. I think it's been proven before that if you start lumping it, it comes back even quicker, gives you less chance to set yourselves and different things. So I think the fact that they didn't resort to lumping it consistently last night when they were under pressure suggests that they will stick to the game plan when the pressure's on. And although they ended up going slightly longer, they did do it when Edward was on, and it wasn't just aimlessly punted up the pitch. It was to Edward to take it in and try to get the passing going. And I just think that does bode well for if the pressure was to be on against Rangers as well, that they would continue to stick with what they're meant to be doing. And Ange obviously thinks that is the way to go about it, and it will pay off if you stick to it.
He said that, didn't he, Alison, after the first leg against AZ? He was asked, how will you approach the game over in Holland? And he basically said, we'll attack them. I don't see why he would change his mind and his philosophy for the Rangers match if that's how he wants to approach a second leg in a European qualifier with a 2-0 advantage.
I've not heard anything at all from Ange Postecoglou that would incline me to believe he would compromise his style at all. I think he's been very open. I think he's been very transparent about his football ideals, about the vision he has, about the teams he likes to watch, the way he coaches teams. I think we saw it a way back when he first walked in the door and Celtic as a club released the footage of him on the training ground, and you saw the message coming through immediately. I've seen nothing that would lead me to believe that he would ever deviate from it. I think people know what to expect. I think his players know what to expect. I think there's a very clear identity within the team. It's not always going to go well. There are going to be moments where it's fraught. I think last night is maybe the first time that you've seen this team in terms of where they've come from. It's the first time you've seen them for a month or so have a bit of pressure within a game and manage it and be asked to manage it and cope with some adversity within a game. And what I would say too about Joe Hart is that it was a shocker of a mistake. I think that goal it was harrowing to watch, to be honest. But he recovered from it very quickly, which I think is a mark of an experienced goalkeeper. I think he then produced a couple of decent saves in the second half too. So I think you have that. I think his leadership will be important too. I do think on a personal level, I think Celtic still need as a club a couple of centre halves to come in. I think there needs to be defensive reinforcements. I'm not sure that will happen before the window. But to answer your question, there's nothing that we've seen or heard that would incline you to believe that there'll be a change of style.
You mentioned the identity there. Yep, I think that's clear to see. And do you think that's why Anthony Ralston will keep his place instead of Josip Juranovic coming in for a debut?
I think he will. I definitely think he will. I just I don't see him I don't see Ange dropping him the way that he's been playing, and I agree that he did have at moments he had a torrid time of it against Carlson last night in the first half, but he grew into the game and ended up having quite a good game. He obviously played the ball through for Celtic's opener as well. I just don't see him dropping out for that game on Sunday, and I don't think if Greg Taylor's fit from left back as well, I don't see Juranovic going left back either. I think if Greg Taylor isn't fit, I still think it would be Adam Montgomery as well. I think he would put his faith in him.
Alison, where do you stand on this?
I'm not quite so sure. I think Anthony Ralston has impressed a lot of people in recent weeks. I think he's performed particularly well under serious pressure and a lot of question marks hanging over him. But I just wonder, in terms of the element of surprise that a new fullback might give. I think if the way that Celtic play and the way they try and build from the back, I think if Rangers are to have any success against them, you would think that you would put pressure on the two fullbacks. You would try and pen them in order that Celtic can't get out and play the kind of expansive football that leads them further up the park, where they can be very, very swift on the attack. And I just wonder if maybe the thought of coming in with a fairly experienced right back just might surprise a few people. It just might mean that there's something different to Celtic that people don't expect. I'm not sure, but it's an interesting one, and I think we'll all watch with interest on Sunday morning to see what the team is.
It's going to be interesting in midfield as well. I think that Callum McGregor will be there with the captain's armband on, just behind David Turnbull and Tom Rogic. Personally, I think that Ryan Christie will play out wide. Now, Rangers have Ryan Jack out, and John Lundstrom hasn't had a great start to the season for them. So I think that it'll be Davis with Kamara and then either Joe Aribo or Scott Arfield. Now, if they play Joe Aribo, that's another attack-minded midfielder there, which could give some space, Sean, for Celtic to work through the middle third to the final third with players like Rogic and Turnbull advancing.
I think so. I think as much as there's potentially problems with in terms of the COVID and stuff about who Rangers can actually call upon, midfield's not their worry. They can pick their first choice midfield three if they want, which is, as far as I'm aware, Davis, Kamara and Aribo. They can all. I think they will actually go for Arfield for some reason. I think because of the game and stuff, I think they'll go Arfield and maybe move Aribo wide. But whether they go Aribo or Arfield, yes, I think it will be a slightly more attacking midfielder than the other two. I've kind of touched on it in the preview that will begin up tomorrow, that for me a lot of it depends on how much freedom Celtic can create for Callum McGregor to get on the ball, because as Ed restricted that freedom, and I think you could see that with the way that Celtic can at times struggle to move the ball from defence to midfield to attack. And I think a lot of that was the fact that so much of it goes through McGregor, and I would think that Rangers will target that, whether that's putting a man on him or actively putting a man on him, or whether it's just the way that they shuttle across. I think they'll try and restrict that. In terms of Turnbull and Rogic, who I think he will stick with Rogic in the middle. Certainly from the start, I think he will. I think a lot of it will depend on how free they get themselves as well. And don't get caught up with the tight space that's there when the Rangers midfield three kind of shuttle across and try and close these spaces down, because those two, if they do get free, can create absolute havoc for Rangers between those lines, I think. And then we've already touched on it further forward with Kyogo, the way he buzzes about, the way he moves. If that transition between midfield and attack goes the way that Ange Postecoglou will want it to go, then there's the potential for Kyogo to create an absolute nightmare scenario for the Rangers defence for me.
Depends actually where he plays, because Alison, if what you're saying comes true and you think Edouard will be given a final start for Celtic, it means Kyogo will get pushed out to the left, where he'll be coming up against young Patterson, because I think Tavernier's one of the ones caught up, is that right, in the COVID scare? So that'll be, a massive test for such a young right back coming up against the form player in the country.
Yeah, I think it's one of the question marks that you won't know until you see what both teams are and what the starting lineups are. I think there's also the possibility of even playing Edward out left and playing Kyogo through the middle. That's all I think you would expect the former, but I think that would be an option too. But I think Celtic's movement is very good. I think they move the ball very quickly. Everything we've seen over the last month has been maybe 1 and 2 touch football all the time, and it can cut teams open. I think we've spoken. This week was always going to be a fairly big test, and it's a barometer of just how far Celtic have come in a fairly short space of time. Much of the team will stay the same. The spine of the team won't be different hugely from the team that lost at Ibrox a few months ago. There's a few notable additions in there, but it'll be interesting to see how they line up and what the philosophy is. But I wouldn't doubt that Kyogo, assuming he is fit too, given the fact that he was hobbling at bits last night, but I think he looks like a player who would relish the opportunity to go in and test himself on the biggest stage of all. Now, it's also fairly daunting. I'm not sure anyone will be able to prepare them for what they're about to walk out to, given the fact that there will be no Celtic supporters in the stadium. I think we all know the kind of noise and the hostility of the reception that you're going to get. I sometimes think it's overplayed at times when you discuss experienced players. I'm not sure they're entirely intimidated by it, but I think the best way to quieten it is to go and start playing a bit of football.
Yeah, well, I'm conscious that we are running out of time for you, but while we've got you, we'll have a quick chat about the Europa League draw. Sean, it was quite an exciting draw, I think, for Celtic today. Leverkusen, Real Betis and Ferencváros, who Celtic have recent history with. But I think it's always good to draw teams that you don't play fairly regularly in Europe. For a while, it felt like Celtic were drawing Barcelona, for example, every other year, and the novelty does wear off eventually. But yeah, Real Betis, a bit of a relationship between the clubs, and Jeremy Frimpong now at Bayer Leverkusen. Welcome back.
It wasn't quite Scotland v Israel, but it was as if it was Celtic Barcelona quite a bit. No, I think it's a difficult group, to be honest. I think obviously it wasn't that long ago we found out exactly how Ferencváros can sting you. I think the other two teams, I think Leverkusen and Real Betis, I think both of them would probably look at the group and think they should be the top two. So I think the onus is on Celtic to prove them wrong rather than anything else. I think they're very difficult ties. And I tweeted out as well, I think it's a cracking group. I think it's going to be some real good games to watch. And they're one way or the other. It'll be really good games to watch, I think.
Alison, how do you see Celtic's chances, I suppose? I think Sean's right that Leverkusen are the top seed and will probably comfortably win it, but all to play for second place or not quite?
I think it's a very difficult group. I really do. I think it'll be tough to progress from it. I know the third spot then dropped down a level and go into the new tournament, but I think, and obviously there's a revised format too for first and second places in terms of the numbers now that progress, but I think it's a tough group. What I would say is that I think there's an easing of pressure. I think just Celtic's challenge, given what had gone on last season and what had been inherited, I think the question after the Midtjylland defeat, I think, was just simply in getting there and getting some form of European football. Now you're there, I think you want to go and embrace it and give yourself the best possible chance, but I think there will be difficult games.
It's quite a shame, actually, the coronavirus situation, because that's 3 cracking away days potentially. There, Leverkusen, Celtic fans would base themselves in Dusseldorf, which is a great city, Betis and Seville, and then Budapest. I mean, they're all fairly easily reachable, Sean, from various airports around Prestwick, Glasgow, Edinburgh. It's quite a shame that it can't be treated normally.
Aye, given the away days that are there, it's. I mean, first and foremost, in terms of what's actually going to happen on the pitch, I genuinely do think it's a really exciting group, and you can't help but think that. I mean, I made the joke earlier on in the morning briefing about getting Ferencváros again, but that might come back to bite me now. And as you say, Frimpong as well. I mean, there's always these wee quirks. You've also in the other group, you've got Dembele going back to Ibrox and stuff. So there's always these wee things that come up in
a warm reception there.
I'm sure. I'm sure.
Well, we'll round things off, Sean and Alison, just by asking you how you actually think things will go for Celtic on Sunday, if you're willing to put your neck on the line.
I'm going to go for Celtic to win 2-1.
I will I think if there's an early goal, I think there's going to be a good few goals. Conversely, I think if Rangers sit in and Celtic don't break them down quickly, I think it could easily be a really, really tense and even game. But on the basis that I trust that Celtic will come flying out the blocks, I'm going to go 4-2 Celtic.
Oh.
And definitely going to go Kyogo with a goal scorer. Considering I said it on here the other day for last night's game, didn't back it, raging.
All I'll say on it is I don't think it'll be 0-0. I'll leave it at that. All right, okay, so that was a nice wee afternoon interlude. Sean, Alison, cheers for coming along again.
Thank you.
Andy.